Okay, what we're doing today is we're explaining the history of Dunnellon, Florida. A lot of folks don't realize Dunnellon is the Boomtown of Florida. Much like the oil rush of Pennsylvania, the gold rush of California at Sutter's Mill in 1849, Florida had its own rush, but it wasn't oil, it wasn't gold, it was a mineral called phosphate. Phosphate is an ingredient in fertilizer, and the impact of the discovery here of phosphate in 1889 impacted people on 2 continents. The discovery here, just not very far, just to the end of the street from where we're currently at, changed the economy of Central Florida for 2 generations, and it impacted a lot of the farming communities in the old world, Germany and Belgium. By the 1890s, a lot of the soils of old Europe had been depleted, and phosphate was a necessary ingredient to use in the soils over there. The phosphate discovered here in 1889 was the highest grade phosphate ever known, ever discovered anywhere on the planet. It was such a powerful phosphate that when they first started mining it and turning it into fertilizer, they did not know what it would do to plants. It was entirely experimental. And I was just reading in preparation for this a report of business folks that visited here in 1891, 2 years after the discovery. And they were producing and mining the phosphate and using it in farming, but they did not know what impact it would have on plants. There was legitimate concern that it was too potent and too high a degree of phosphate to be able to use. That proved to be wrong, and the Boomtown lasted for 20 years. And this was the most important mining hub for phosphates in the world for about a good 20 years after 1889. We're going to go inside and look at the original plat map of Dunnellon from 1887 and explain some of the reasons that it was both helpful and unhelpful that we platted the town before we figured out there's phosphate rock underneath. So we'll go inside, take a look at the map. What's important to realize is the discovery of phosphate was in May of 1889. The town was founded and laid out in 1887. This is impactful for several reasons. When the town was laid out, and this is not meaningful to people other than the people that live here, but it's helpful for city planners and everyone in Florida that's seen the exponential growth of places, how things happen. The town was laid out in all of the land the investors were able to buy on the Withlacoochee and what was then the Wekiva River. We now call it the Rainbow River. We've changed the name several times in there. This is the Rainbow River, the famous Rainbow River everyone tubes. This is the Withlacoochee River. Now, part of the reason the town is here is based on geography. The same thing that enabled us to have the phosphate bin. It's all about geography and the rock underneath. The Withlacoochee River is about 180 miles long. It runs roughly north from the Green Swamp at Tampa over 100 miles to this point right here. This is the point at which it has a place to flow through the phosphate rock underneath, and at that point it hangs a left and makes a general westerly direction towards the Gulf of Mexico. The Rainbow River does the same thing. It flows along the ridge of phosphate rock, and because this is the break within the formation of phosphate rock, this is where they both take a westerly path to the Gulf. It's no accident that they meet here. This is where there was a break in the phosphate rock formation where they're able to flow through. It's also why we had the Boomtown of the phosphate era. Now, this town was laid out in 1887, and you have to remember the guy that wrote the plat map was probably in Chicago. He never came to Florida. He was given the general outline of the area. They built the train station, and they built another train station across the river, and that was the extent of the buildings in the town of Dunnellon. There were no other buildings. There was this. They later built a boarding house the same year that was located right here. Those were in 1889, when phosphate was discovered and the boom began, there were 2 buildings, the railroad depot and the boarding house here, Mr. and Fred's Depot. Within 2 years after the discovery of phosphate, even after a year, It was a booming town. In 1889, when Phosphate was discovered, there was probably a population of 75 people in this area. By 1890, 50 or 75 laborers would show up at the depot every day looking for work. Now, this is where it's interesting. The layout of Dunnellon is very unusual because the guy that drew out the plat map, who was never ever here to see it, had to run the railroad up this way so that he could design this part of town, but he could not run all the roads that way. This section line was a holdout person that did not sell the property. That's very significant because over here, beyond that section line, that's where Phosphate was discovered. If this fella had sold out and they had platted the town, it's entirely possible the discovery of Phosphate would have happened elsewhere, because where they found the rock would have been under platted streets. Above the town limit, right here, was to become the town of Rockwell. That was an entire town. It had a large rail station. It was headquarters of the Dunnellon Phosphate Company. There's a massive phosphate mine here, as well as right here is what we call today's Blue Cove, which is probably 50 acres of water now that was mined out. The important thing to remember is they mined the phosphate rock where it was. Dunnellon is the center of the phosphate district. A lot of the highest grade phosphate is right here under the town. Had they waited instead of platting the town in 1887, had they waited another 3 years, the town would not be here at all. The rock is underneath the town. Had they not platted it and sold individual lots that they had to buy back, they would have ultimately dug under what is now the city of Dunnellon. Years later, there was conjecture of demolishing the town to mine the rock underneath, and it was deemed not cost effective to tear down the town, move it, and mine the rock underneath. But just the fact that it was discussed by business interests, that tells you how valuable the rock underneath is. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to get right here to help folks understand the issues the city planners have. This right here has been a city planner's nightmare ever since they laid this out. This right here is a 60-foot wide back road. The town was laid out under the railroad. The center of town is the depot, long gone. It's been gone since 1905. It's now in a different place. The town was laid out to be centered on this. This Dunnellon Avenue is now what we call US 41. This 60-foot wide back alley for horse and buggy traffic is now a 4-lane major thoroughfare, east or north-south thoroughfare through this part of Florida. The crossing, there's now the bridge here. There's only 3 crossings in Citrus County across the Little Okeechee River, this being one of them. So this is a major traffic through point here, and this is a problem. Now, we've rearranged this over the last 130 years or so, and the reason we're doing this here is the Department of Transportation is eliminating the last piece that represents this. It's a little traffic impairment, flower bed, that's all it is. There's probably a single-digit number of people that even understand what happened here. But we'll get down and stand in the middle of the road, and I'll explain to you how this changed from 1887 to 1903 to today. It's gone through a lot of changes. And this is a center of commerce for Marion County for the 25 years, the late 1890s and the 19-teens up until the First World War. The center of commerce for Marion County was right here, and then, of course, the county seat in Ocala, where all the peas had to be transferred. So let's go up the road and look at that. Okay, we're trying to explain the background of Boomtown, Dunnellon, and we're in the chaos of the traffic cam here now, and you kind of have to view things as they are now and then compare them to the map that we just viewed. When the town was originally laid out, the important thing to remember is it was laid out for the train depot that would have been just a number of feet behind us across the railroad track. The depot was the center of town. It was the center of the business district. Everything else was laid out around it. Now, we'll try to explain to you the layout of the town and what is remaining here and tell you where the major buildings were to understand the business district. Boomtown of the 1890s. Obviously, it's 2025. Things have changed. We have tons of traffic here. The town has grown exponentially since then. But to help understand that the problems the city planners have, you have to understand what was here. This, where we're standing in 1903, was the Dunnellon Hotel. It was a 2-story hotel, and where we're standing would have been the bottom level business, perhaps the pharmacy. The hotel sat at a candy corner and extended down to about where the Triangle Bank building is, where you can see behind me. It was a very large, very long 2-story hotel that took up the entirety of what is now US 41. The traffic up until the 1950s, when they widened and straightened US 41, came down, went around the hotel, took a right-hand turn and then a left, and came back around to continue on again. See, what's important to realize is when they laid out the town, this was for horse and buggy traffic. They laid it all out to make the long-gone train depot as a centerpiece of the business district. During the Boomtown era, the Boomtown district, the business district extended. Part of it was a 2-story hotel. That's where we're standing. Continued down past the Triangle Bank building, and all of the business district was on Illinois Street. Dunnellon was at that time a very small town. It was surrounded by mining camps in every direction, so the little downtown area every Friday night would be raided by thousands of workers that showed up from every direction on payday or Friday night. What is now Highway 41, where the red light is, that was what they called the bicycle path. It was a sand path. They called it the bicycle path. On the other side of the bicycle path, from here to the river, was all bars, brothels, and workers' cabins. There was no sanitary sewer. There was nothing, no wells to speak of. There was no infrastructure of any type from here to the river. What you see behind me was a no man's land where the respectable folks in town did not cross the bicycle path and enter the area between here and what is now City Hall, and the Hawkeye's home was on the river. There was a sawmill, there was a turpentine still, there was about 13 to 15 bars between here and the river. On weekends, there were shootings, night things. Most murders went unsolved. Every Monday morning, the Justice of the Peace had a hardware store back behind us. On this corner, within 50 feet of where we're at, was a hardware store. On Monday mornings, the Justice of the Peace would hold court, and he literally would sit on a keg of nails and conduct court and sentence people to whatever they did over the weekend. And if somebody came into the store, he would go take care of his customers when he come back outside and conduct the business. At that time, actually, the mayor served as Justice of the Peace, and he actually did the sentencing of whatever crimes were done over the weekend. That took place in what is now this parking lot right here. This was the hardware store. The hardware store remained until about the 1980s. That building, until they tore it down in the 1980s, was the Rush hardware store. It was the Rush family that had it the last 50 years that existed. And next to that was Mrs. Mack's restaurant. It was the McDilda family was a very important family. That's all gone, but the story's still with them. And this little triangle flower bed will be taken out by the state in a matter of days or weeks, and there will be no semblance ever of the layout of the old Dunnellon. This is foundation stone laying right here from the Dunnellon Hotel. This was probably all that remains in my hand of the Dunnellon Hotel. It was built in 1903. Was demolished in the 1950s when they straightened out the road, and all that's left of it is this very odd triangle flower bed. Okay, we're explaining how the Boomtown of Dunnellon came to be, how the town is set up. We looked at the map to try and understand it better. But when we looked at the map within City Hall, the original town map, I pointed out the section line where the town abruptly ended. It has not changed since 1887 when they laid out the town. You can't see behind us, but the street, the town, ends about 10 feet back behind us over there. And this is 45 acres that has never been built on. Because of that land deal, when it was not incorporated in the town to 1887, it's remained a separate section of land. Now, the story behind it is really fascinating. This is the site where phosphate was discovered. As we mentioned, had it been bought and platted as part of town, it's unlikely they would have discovered phosphate here. They would have found it, it would have been somewhere else. But the layout of the town of Dunnellon would have been different. The site of the discovery of phosphate would have been different, and the people that made huge fortunes from it would have been different. Basically, the fact that this land was not purchased, incorporated into town when they platted the town, changed the history of Florida in many different ways. Now, what happened is when they discovered phosphate here, they turned this area, this section, into a massive phosphate mine. Looking today, the trees are ancient. It looks like really unchanged. It looks pristine. It looks like old Florida. Nothing could be further from the truth. This land is highly altered. The land behind us has been raised by the fill from the giant strip mine that is there. Or we're going to go down and we're going to look at the strip mine. We're going to look at some of the trees and try and get an idea of what this land looked like. Now, the script has kind of been flipped. The area has very few ancient oak trees or virgin trees of any type. Most of the trees have been removed. The oldest trees are actually on this property here. I'll explain that more when we look at some of the giant pine trees. Let's see some back there and look at the water, the strip mine, the fit, and speak about it a little bit more. Okay, where we're at now is we're within the confines of what we call the Nine Island Cove Park. It's the park that never became a park. As part of the history of the town and of the Boomtown, this was never built on. It was turned into a subdivision in the 1990s, but the subdivision failed. People went bankrupt, and it's still private, undeveloped property, much as it was left after it was left as a strip mine. Now, we've kind of flipped the script on what we consider pristine natural property here. This looks to be pristine. The trees are massive. This is one of the largest pine trees that I know of anywhere in the area behind me. Now, it seems like it's natural and been there forever, but that is far from the case. The water here is actually the phosphate pit. It's a strip mine that was mined one shovel load, one wheelbarrow load at a time. This is one of the first, if not, this might be mine number one. I have to check the records. This is one of the original phosphate mines from the mining era. For numerous reasons, it's remained undeveloped since they mined it. Mother Nature has retaken it. That giant pine tree behind us, I would bet if we cut it down and counted the rings, it would date to around the year 1900. I bet that tree volunteered there between 1895 and 1905 as Mother Nature was retaking this after it was just completely stripped of everything as a strip mine. It remains undeveloped. Nothing's been built here since. And just by happenstance, this has remained a natural, secluded area in the middle of the Dunnellon Historic District. There's been 3 attempts over a period of 25 years to have the city turn this into a park. The city's failed all 3 attempts. There will probably be another. The owners of the property, me being one of them, would be willing to consider speaking with the city about making it a park. But, the city has to make better decisions set. But this is one of the original phosphate mines, the Dunnellon Phosphate Company. This is the original site of the discovery of phosphate, and it remains natural to this day. And it would be a very important historic site, and it would help the economy of the town if they were able to turn it into a park. And until it gets developed, which is near zero possibility, and for a generation, it remains a possible site for a park for people to come and understand the geography and the history of Boomtown, Dunnellon. And so that's where we're at, and that's probably the way we're going to be for the next 10 or 15 years.